Hi everyone, my name is Imogen Peening and I'll be moderating today's panel, which is all about the Science Writing and Screenwriting Team Bootcamps, hosted by the State Library. A little bit about me, I was an Inky Award Shadow Judge in 2019, and since then I have been a very active member of the YA community, and I have become a member of the Readings Teams Advisory Board, and I am currently in my final year of high school. On behalf of the State Library of Victoria, I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Wurrung people, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional lands of all Victorian Aboriginal clans and their cultural practices and traditional knowledge systems. We recognise that the state collection holds traditional cultural knowledge belonging to Indigenous communities in Victoria and around the country. We support communities to protect the integrity of this information gathered from their ancestors in the colonial period. We pay our respects to their elders past and present who have handed down these systems of practice to each new generation for millennia. This program has been made possible with the generosity of the Serp Hills Foundation and the JTM Foundation. Today, I am joined by Nova Wheatman, who is a writer for books, film, and television. She's an award-nominated screenplay writer and has since gone on to write a whole host of lovely YA and middle grade novels. Her bootcamp is all about screenwriting, and it will give you an opportunity to develop your skills as budding screenwriters. Also with me, I have Alicia Sometimes. Alicia is a writer, poet, and broadcaster. Her poems have been featured in collections like Best Australian Science Writing and Best Australian Poems. Her bootcamp is all about science writing, and with her help, you'll be able to add to your skill set as a science writer. So welcome, Nova and Alicia.
Welcome. Thanks, Imogen.
Okay, so to get the questions rolling, first I'd like to ask you to each tell us a little bit more about yourselves and what it is that you do. Nova, would you like to go first?
Sure. Sure. So I started as a writer way back when I was about 10, and it was the only thing I ever wanted to do with my life. And I had this old typewriter and I used to just bang out stories on it. And I just sort of fell into writing for television as my kind of first job out of uni, I guess. And I worked on H2O as a storyliner, and then I worked on various television shows, and then just sort of realised that actually I really love writing books as well. So now I write mainly middle grade, so for 9 to sort of 14-year-olds and some YA. So that's me.
Oh, and you have the best name ever, Nova.
Thanks.
Yeah, my name's Alicia, and I've been writing for such a long time. And I guess if anyone told me in high school that I was going to be a poet, I wouldn't really have believed them. But I was writing poetry and sending letters as early as I can remember. And I've always had a passion for science as well. So it kind of feels like a cheat saying I'm a science writer, because I come from it from a creative point of view, even though I've written some nonfiction articles on science and I broadly read nonfiction on science. I am just so passionate about bringing the arts and the sciences together. So I've been a broadcaster for a long time. I've written, many a short story. I've dabbled in so many different creative areas, and always find that I come back home to poetry and writing about the universe. So my particular passions are writing about quantum physics and astrophysics. And yeah, so I'm so excited to be here today.
Wow. So impressive.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how do we back that up?
I don't know. I don't even know what quantum physics is.
Nor do I. Well, that's very impressive from the both of you. So what can teenagers expect to learn from your workshops?
So I guess the thing about screenwriting is it's a huge beast. It's quite an unwieldy thing. And I learned screenwriting across many years at uni when I did it. And so to try and jam in things into 4 weeks, we're going to have to do a very speedy course. What I'm most interested in, I think, about with screenwriting is great characters, great dialogue, what you need to have in your script and what you don't need, how to tell what isn't working. So we'll do lots of great exercises. We will do lots of scene building. We'll do maybe not lots of plotting. Plotting is not my favorite thing. Lots of character building, lots of dialogue writing, and lots of looking at a scene and trying to work out what doesn't work and how we can make it better.
Oh, I wish I was a teenager so I could be in your course, Nova.
Likewise.
We will be looking at writing about the things that we love around us. And that's the thing about science, is it can be biology and chemistry or physics, or just even looking at our bodies or the world around us, or pondering the universe, the past, present, future. It's so encompassing. And for millennia, we've reached out to the stars and wondered how we can be part of a larger thing in our place in the universe. So I think that everyone has those tools in their toolbox to be able to write about science. It's just sort of fitting a little bit of those jigsaw pieces together. And like Nova says, it's just such a big thing to do screenwriting, to do to learn everything about how to construct a poem or writing about science. But we'll just start with a little bit of tools, and anyone can begin with this course. You don't have to be interested in poetry. You don't necessarily have to be interested in nonfiction, but just a real passion for the world around you.
Okay, well, both of those courses sound amazing, and now I want to go to them. So what do you think the biggest benefit that teenagers will be getting from your courses and your workshops?
I think for me, like when I was a teenager and all I wanted to do was be a writer, and I didn't really have access to writers, and I didn't really have access to information about how to write. And I think what is fantastic about teens now is that they are so much more literate in terms of writing screenplays and writing film. We understand it. Young people watch so much in terms of content that they really have a great understanding of what works and what doesn't. And I think hopefully if you come to the screenwriting course, you just get to be in a group of people, because this is what happened last year. There was a great group of students who were really, really interested in writing scripts. They were interested in all different sorts of screenplays, not all the same sort of things, not all short films. Some wanted to write television. But you'll get to workshop with other people. You'll get to hear other people's ideas. You'll get to bounce ideas around. You'll get to have access to me to ask me about what is working, what isn't working. And we can just sort of enjoy diving into screenwriting for 4 weeks, which I think is such a lovely thing to do.
Yeah, I think Nova hits it on the head there, that it is about that workshop environment too. And even though it can be virtual, the fact that you can get some feedback off people, you might be shy to read your piece, but it's such a beautifully inclusive and safe environment, which is just fantastic. And the other thing too is, I always say, sometimes genius just doesn't come to you at 5 o'clock, on a Tuesday afternoon, and you haven't got everything there, but you might just have that kernel, that little note, that little moment that you get a spark from, whether it's from the whole group or just an exercise. And what you can do is just read that little bit, that little part, that fragment, and that alone can spark a short story, a script, and a nonfiction article. So we're just going to look at little kernels of moments. And what I like to do is get a lot of writing happening so that you can go away and then you can build upon it.
That's great.
Yeah, I think that's really useful, getting those little moments of inspiration. I think it's really great that we can kind of have workshop environments again, even if they are virtual. Also, something I did forget to mention to the audience, so sorry to you guys, is that at the end of this, we are going to be doing an audience Q&A. So if any of you have any questions, please just put them down in the chat box and we might ask some of them. Whoops, I forgot. So for both of you, what do you think makes a good piece of writing in your genres of specialty? So Nova, what do you consider to be a really good piece of screenwriting? And of course, Alicia, what do you think makes an appealing science writing?
I guess for me, I worked at Cinema Nova, weirdly enough. Everyone thought that I owned it, but I worked there for 10 years. I know, it was ridiculous. That's why I got the job, I think. And so part of my job was doing publicity. And so basically I watched about 7 or 8 films a week. And that was all I did, really, for about 10 years. I've watched a lot of films. And what you start to see, I think, and you would notice this watching television, you start to Can you still hear me? Maybe. I think when we're watching film and television, you realize that a lot of the stories are the same. And I think what's really important is that a good screenplay is about how a story is told, not necessarily what the story is. It might be the same story might be told in 4 different ways. It's how that writer crafts that story, the kind of unique twist that they give a screenplay. And I think for me, they're the great moments where you see or you read a screenplay or you watch a film or watch a television show and it's being surprised. It's just being completely knocked out of left field and just thinking, wow, I would never have done that. That's for me what makes a great screenplay.
Yeah, the way things are constructed is so important, isn't it? The way that we can build upon a story or a poem or a screenplay. And I love the fact that, you know, our lives aren't cliches. None of us are living cliches. We're living these unique, rich, deep, beautiful lives. But we could possibly write our lives in a cliche way if we don't look at how things are constructed and built upon. But like anyone sort of starting out writing in any field, it's great to just sort of look at how the bones come together, how little bits and pieces are made, and like clay, we sculpt a poem or sculpt a story or a screenplay, and that's what we, you know, I hope to do in these groups. And I just love the fact that things can be built upon. So that's what is great to do some writing and then walk away and keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really quite amazing. I think that I love hearing authors talk about what inspires them with like their genres of specialty, of course. I think that can be really interesting, and you both answered that fabulously. And just a fun question that I'm going to do. So what is a recent book that you've read that you really enjoyed? Because I love hearing about reading.
I'm going to go with a YA book because I think we all need to be reading more YA. And that is Leanne Hall's book, The Gaps, which I think it came out last year. It will be, you know, it will win things. It will be in many award ceremonies. It's Melbourne-based. It's a great, fierce, angry look at what it means if a girl in a class is abducted, and it's about what happens to the girls or the students who are left behind and how they feel and how it changes them. It's about fear, it's about confronting your fear, it's about friendship, and I just think it's a really beautifully written piece of work. So that's what I've read recently.
Leanne Hall's an incredible writer, isn't she?
She's great.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah, even in science writing, it's just like, I'm sure you feel the same, Nova. There's just such a rich plethora, you know, there's a plethora of work that's out there. I love Katie Mack's book, The End of Everything, because it's about how the universe in billions of years is going to finish. She gives us sort of like 5 options of how we're all going to die, except it's billions of years in the future. And you know, not millions, but billions. And she's just such a great story writer, and obviously an incredible astrophysicist as well, and incredibly smart. But just the way she threads the stories together are great. Corey Tutts, the first Australians talking about Indigenous astronomy is quite incredible too, and that's just come out, and I just love it. Page to page. It's great.
That sounds great. That sounds like a great read. I want to read that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alicia, your book sounds great, but kind of terrifying.
The end of everything, yes. We're all going to die. Spoiler.
That's fun.
Ages away, Imogen, it's fine. It's like
we're fine. Ages away. And yeah, The Gaps, I highly recommend to anyone that hasn't read it. It's amazing. Also, so what are some trends that you guys have seen in writing, especially for young people, that you hope will stick around?
I think I feel like we're getting to a point where we're realizing that young people can really face just bigger ideas, and that there's less talking down to, and there's more just brave exploration of thematics. I think that we kind of, I feel like it's just more honest, that we're being more honest with young people. Certainly I feel like as a middle grade writer, and I do write for the younger spectrum, but that I can write about all sorts of things now, and publishers are just really happy to go, yep, that's fine. You can write about grief, you can write about death, you can write about those issues as long as they're handled well and honestly. And so I feel like that's a new thing for me in the last 10 years, I would say. So
yeah, and also accessibility too. So you're seeing more and more young people grappling with these incredible, fresh ideas, and then sending it off to publications where, I don't know about you, Nova, but I would have been absolutely frightened at that age to do so. Or more importantly, not even know about things. And I think that the world just opens up in a beautiful way, and multimedia as well. So when you think about storytelling, even whether if it's script writing or poetry or nonfiction, the fact that you can do these multimedia stories, you could do science communication and stories on TikTok, or have you little YouTube films and so forth. I think these things have great agency and are incredibly exciting. So for me, it's the medium as well.
Yeah, I think that's so true, because when I started as a screenwriter, we were making films on film. And the idea that anyone would be doing that now, you just you wouldn't be buying film. It's expensive. You can't reshoot it if you muck it up. Like, it's just digital has opened up accessibility, I think, issues in a whole lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure. That's something I haven't really considered, because I think a lot of young people like myself, we have always lived in the digital age. But that's so interesting to think about. And I think that's a really good point about accessibility too, and like kind of who can access what as well. I think that we have so much more information than we ever really have had in society. And I think that really opens some interesting trends for YA, which is exciting. So back to the workshops. How beneficial would this workshop, your individual workshops, have been to you when you guys were teenagers?
Oh. I was just like, oh my God, okay. Oh, I would have loved it. I was, in some ways, I was an outward performer, but some of my most precious work, of course, in my bedroom, to my heart, I wouldn't have perhaps shared it with anyone, but just having that one teacher or that one friend who was reading my work and giving me feedback was incredible. So to have access to something like this, where I want the shy members of any audience listening now to be really comforted in the fact that you can sort of be laid back a little bit and then jump in when you want to. And those were more gregarious. Of course, you can give a lot of input, but I think that you can get a lot out of it no matter what your temperament, which is awesome. I would have loved anything like this. I just think that it's so important to just do it. If you want to be a writer, just do it. And it doesn't matter how bad or whatever the word is that you think about your first try at something is, just get it out and then mold later.
Yeah, same. I think it would have been fantastic for me. Like, I just think, because I wrote so much in my teenage years, lots of awful poetry, Alicia, that never went anywhere. And I was never brave enough to show it to anyone. And I think what I love about these workshops, and actually I think what is beautiful about this format, is that students, even if you feel like reticent about sharing, you can put it in the chat. You can do it your own. You can find your own way, or you can send us, you can send it to us later. There's all sorts of ways where you can kind of have a voice. And I think I never had a voice at that age. Like, my writing was just for me, and it was never read by anyone except my mum. It would have been so nice to share it, I think, with other people my age. And I think that's a really great thing about these workshops.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's great to let people my age kind of have that kind of creative outlet, even if it's not like that's outside of school, especially because I think a lot of the writing that we do is very much it's all assessed and it's all dependent on marks, and instead of like your own enjoyment. My dogs are barking.
And also,
I think there's
sorry, Imogen, I cut you off. I didn't mean to.
Oh no, I wasn't really going to add anything. So what was that you were going to say?
I was just going to say, and also the benefit of having people in the space that you don't know. So I think often when I go into a classroom, you'll see a dynamic in a classroom where some students won't want to talk, won't want to speak up because they have a particular role in that class. What is great about this is you don't know anyone else. Like, this is like strangers. And so there's a lot of anonymity and sort of joy in that, I think, where you can just be, you can come and be something different if you want to be. So that's a really nice thing, I think.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. And I think especially because it's a group of people who are like-minded, you know, these are all people who are interested in science writing or screenwriting. So I think it like creates a really nice new environment for teenagers to express themselves. So another question for the both of you. So what has been one of your biggest sources of inspiration in your writing?
Oh, that's hard. You go, Alicia. I've been think.
For me, it's something I'm sure that's common to so many writers, is just complete and utter curiosity. So I'm just always, especially with science writing, I'm just curious about something. So I'll just research it to an inch of its life and then go away and marinate on that and then come out with something. And recently I did a virtual residency in Manchester at the Portico Library, and I had access to the librarian, and I got to look at books from the 1900s on light and people's ideas about what the sun was doing at the time and about light and its properties. And it was just like heaven. Like, you know, when you go to the State Library and you look at something, it's like, oh my God, I get to do this. I get to just be curious and run around this room of my head and just make stuff up. What do you mean? Or if it's nonfiction, you know, I get to really probe it. What is this? It's so good. Yeah, I love it.
That's awesome. That's a great answer. I think for me, two different things. So I think for why I wanted to write screenplays was I find I actually get quite lonely, I think, when I'm writing books, and especially when I was younger and I was quite an extrovert, and I found it really hard spending so much time on my own. And I think what I love about writing screenplays is how collaborative it is, and that you, especially if you're working on a television show and you're storylining, you're in a room with other writers and you're generating ideas together. And I love building with other people on ideas and not owning anything, but it being really free to be owned by a collective. And then I think with writing books, I just get obsessed with character, and then it's usually comes from observation, and then I just go down a weird hole and almost become that person for the period of time that I'm writing, and then let them go and grieve them and then move on to the next one. So yeah.
We writers are strange.
Weird.
Folk, aren't we?
Definitely.
Oh, I think we all get obsessed with characters, just readers live vicariously through them.
Exactly. That's exactly right. It's such a freeing thing just to go, for a few months, I'm just going to be that person and just have a completely different life experience. It's lovely.
Yeah. So Alicia, I have a question just for you. So in the case of science writing, how do you research what you're writing about to ensure that it's accurate and relevant?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a big fear too, writing nonfiction, because I am not primarily a scientist. So I have to research something very, very well. Otherwise I can get it wrong, and still even, you know, at the last minute can, you know, vacillate on how I will present something, because I feel that with science there's a weight of responsibility to be completely true, which is why I do err in the creative a lot, because I want to inspire people to come to science and think about things in a different way. And I just bow down to those great science writers out there and the great scientists that communicate science. I think it's just an amazing thing. So I'd say it's researching reputable people, known sources, many sources, and also don't be afraid to write something in a draft form and then ask someone in that field to have a look at it, or just even answer some questions as well. You'd be amazed at how many people you have access to, and scientists really do love talking about their work and their passion. I'm not saying you should call someone at home and go, hey, I just want to talk about the universe and what's going to happen, how is it all going to end, but that it's an incredible plethora of resources out there, and I just think it's important to start and then worry about that later. And creatively, you've got such a free range. It's just a matter of the responsibility of not getting something too mixed up where you misrepresent.
Yeah, that's an excellent answer, and I think that that kind of research is a real skill, finding reputable sources. And I think that's something that would be really useful, particularly for young people, as they do their schoolwork. I know we don't really like to talk about it, but I think it is nice to like have that skill set of being able to find reputable sources and be able to present information that is accurate and reliable. And I think that's a really great skill that you can learn in the workshop.
Yes.
Yeah. So Nova, what differences have you found in your regular fiction writing compared to writing for the screen?
Yeah, I think for me the biggest, and it is, I do find it quite difficult going between the two forms because they're so different. Writing, and I was working for Neighbours when I first started as a screenwriter, and then I started writing a feature film that was mine, and I got sacked from Neighbours because I was so bad at switching between writing detail and writing very sparse, pulled back soap opera, which is, it's a very different way of writing. And so I think it's writing screenplays requires detail in a different way than writing prose, and they don't share a lot actually. And I often adapt my own, with short film that I've made, I've always adapted my own short story. So I've written them as a short story first, and then I've adapted them into a screenplay. And looking at what you lose or what you gain is really interesting because dialogue will change. Obviously you can cut in a screenplay, you can cut at the end of a scene if it's, you want to, it's much sharper in terms of where those cuts come. The rhythm is different, the pace is different, and just not being able to be inside a character's head, that is my happy place when I'm writing a book. And it's a very different thing when you're writing a screenplay because it's what we're going to see on the screen, not how the character feels. So it's much more show don't tell than even a book is, I think. Does that answer that? Sorry.
Yeah, no, that definitely answers that. I don't think I ever really considered just how different it is because I'm a reader and I'm a viewer. I don't write often. And I think as viewers, you don't really think about the behind the scenes of, characters or, even characters in books. And I think that the processes, I can imagine, would be very different. Yeah. So, Alicia, I'll go back to you again. So are there any particular science topics that you'd like to read more about in the world of science lit, and what do you think is missing?
I mean, I just can't stop because for like 15 years, I had a show on community radio that just looked at books and writing, and I read 2 books a week roughly, and then I've been a reviewer forever and I read books. But the thing is, so I absolutely adore fiction, but you could see my bedside table right now. It is completely terrible, but it's full of like 20 books of science writing as well, because they're the things I sneak in between. It's my go-to, it's my passion, but I absolutely love fiction in all genres too. So I'm a wide reader, but I just love the field that I do love, but I will pick up, say, a chemistry book or something like that, or even maths as well. I love reading about maths, and I'm not so knowledgeable on it, but I love the ideas. So, if you gave me a book on the color purple, and I needed to read about that, I'd love it because I've never thought about that before. So anything is up for grabs. Are there any holes? The thing about science writing is that there's probably holes we don't know about, and watchers, readers, listeners, you will create that because there's just so endless things to write about.
Alicia, when did you discover you were interested in reading about science? Sorry, I didn't. Yeah, I'm just fascinated by that.
It's a great question, and because I have been involved around fiction writing my whole life and reviewing it, that was the first thing I fell in love with. I was reading Snoopy encyclopedias when I was about 4, and I fell in love with just cover to cover reading encyclopedias. I'm not a brainiac by any stretch of the imagination. There is no part of me that's just this, like, I'd rather have my head in a book. I was up trees, I was outside all the time. But when I came inside, I just loved reading about nonfiction. And then I would read fiction, but I'd always come back to the nonfiction, and I find it more freeing or something like that. But my God, you know, to be in, you know, Emma Woodhouse's head, you know, is a great thing. And I absolutely love being in a fictional world, but I sort of escape through nonfiction.
Yep. Wow. Awesome.
Wow. It's really cool. I've never really thought of like nonfiction as that kind of escape, because it is technically real. So yeah, that's really interesting. And I think I can only give you guys one more question, then we can turn it to the audience. So once again, if you guys want to start asking some questions. But Nova, what has been your most memorable screenwriting project?
It probably was writing a short film that I wrote called Mr. Wazinski's Song, which took us overseas to festivals overseas. And I think because I'd written it as a short story first, and then I decided to adapt it. And it's almost silent. It's about a Polish man who loses his hearing during a bomb blast in the war when he's a child, and then has moved to Melbourne and discovers that actually the gauze has been in his ears for 60 years, and when they take it out, he can hear. So it's about sound. So the sound design was really important, and there's very little dialogue in it. So it's about 20 minutes long. And I think just because it was the first time I realized the potential for working with, I guess, the language of sound and not using dialogue, not using words. I'm such a word person. I've always been such a word person. I love dialogue. I love writing dialogue. And for me to write a 20-minute screenplay with maybe half a dozen lines of dialogue really stretched me as a writer, and it made me think about what we would see, how we would write that language, what the character would imagine and hear, and to create that soundscape. So I guess that is my, that project.
Yeah, that's amazing. Sounds like a really good film. Kind of want to watch it. Definitely do.
This one's stupid 60-minute film, so it's very hard to watch.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got some questions from the audience. First one is, when do the courses start? So I'll just answer those ones. So Alicia's science writing bootcamp starts on Tuesday, the 26th of April, and Nova's screenwriting course, or boot camp, I keep saying course, starts on the 28th of April. And another question we have for both of you is, why did you become writers?
Do you want to go first? You go first.
You know, it's such a cliche answer. We've talked about cliches, but I just can't not write. So it's just something I do in my spare time. It's something, you know, if I'm on the beach and I've turned emails off and I'm on holidays, I still pick up a notepad and I write. I do a lot of other creative things too, like make music and so forth, and I still do that, but I just love the way words come together, and they're so playful and they mean so much. And, you know, I think when I was younger, I was a little sensitive soul, because if someone said, hello, how are you? I'd really break down those words. How do you mean that? And you know, words mean so much, and I just love them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, similar, I think. I just never wanted to do anything else. And then at some point I thought, because my dad worked in advertising, so I spent a lot of my childhood hanging out on a film set, and I tried to be an actor and I was dreadful at it. And so it was very clear that I was never going to get on a film set unless I did something behind the scenes. And I thought maybe I can write screenplays, which is where that came from. But before that, I was writing, you know, poetry and songs, and it's just always been the one constant, I think, in my life. Like, I've just always done that, and it's sort of never left me, really. So it's not even that I particularly wanted to be a writer. It just kept, you know,
it chose you.
It did. You know, I went to uni. I studied psychology, and I thought, I'm going to have and no, I ended up it was like there was nothing else I could do, really. So yeah, I think that's what happens with art.
Yeah, I think life finds its way to get there, because studying psychology.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah. Okay, and this is another audience question, and I think it's for Nova. So it says, do you prefer writing screenplays or novels?
Oh, good question. So I think I'm better at writing novels, if I'm honest. But I do love the idea of collaboration, and ideally what I would now love is to adapt one of my novels into a series so that I take it back the other way. I don't love writing television so much. I don't think I'm great at it. I think it's not my skill set, but I do love telling my own stories. And I think that if I'd been able to get, $10 million to make my feature film quickly, then I would have stayed on that course. So I think if I can write my own stories, then I love both equally, I guess. Yeah.
That's amazing. I think there's something that would be particularly special about being able to like see your own piece of work adapted into the screen. That's always been really cool to me.
Yeah.
And we've got another audience question, which is for the both of you. So what themes do you most like to incorporate into screenplays or science writing books? And they've got some examples like coming of age, reality, abandonment, etc. So what themes are you guys interested in?
You go.
Yeah. It kind of, in some ways, it always changes. And, whether, I did a planetarium show on gravitational waves. I'm so interested in the science of the day and things that come to me, as I said, especially about physics or astrophysics. But I've sort of gone back on all these poems I write, and Nova, you may find the same, that you just find this little thread that keeps coming through, and you're like, how did that happen? And it's always about not being able to say the right words. So much of what I'm saying is about falling short of speaking, which is so funny being a writer, but I've gone back years and years, and it's always sort of that thing about, like, even, the universe is so beautiful, what do I say? That kind of thing. So it's like having no words, and I've chosen to be a writer, but that's my theme sometimes.
But that's perfect for a writer, I think. It means that you've got this endless search, which is kind of a lovely, that's great. I wrote a planetarium show too, and I didn't understand any of the science.
Wow.
I was so bad at it. They had to keep coming back and going, no, the Earth, like they had to keep explaining the Earth to me, and I just did not understand. So thematically, I think I write a lot about feeling lost and not knowing who you are, and that search for identity. And I think even regardless of whether I'm writing for young people or whether I'm writing for, adults, that keeps coming up in my work. And I think I also write a lot about class, because I think that's something that really interests me. I don't know. I think that I often have a father-daughter relationship is quite pivotal in my books, not so much in film and TV, but the television or the film stuff that I've written has always been about characters not fitting the world, I guess. So I think that's probably what I most write about.
Yeah, I think those are some great themes from both of you. I think they're quite deep. But this has also definitely taught me that I'm a bit left out and I need to get into planetariums.
Yeah.
I'm the only one. I need to get in.
I was really bad at it, Caitlin. Imogen, it's all right. Like dreadful at it. Didn't no idea.
Yeah, I feel like Alicia's got us covered there.
I do too. I think I should have palmed it off, actually. Yeah.
And we've got another question. This one's for Nova as well. So do you plan to make any more films or TV series?
I do. So one of my YA books, which is called Everything Is Changed, is a backwards story, and it was based on a short film that I made. So I wrote the short film, and then I wrote the book, and now I'd like to write the film of the book so that I kind of complete that circle. So I do really want to write film and television, but I would want it to be my own original ideas. I don't want to work on someone else's ideas anymore. I think that, I'm too old. I've done it for years, and I think it's just time that I kind of, developed something that was mine. That said, if a great television show came to me, like something that I loved, a producer, and said, would you like to work on it? Of course, I'd say yes. So, yes.
Yeah. So television people, let's make it happen. I would definitely like to I would like to watch a show or movie or TV show about everything has changed. Yes, please.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so what is this next question? Let me read it. Okay, so this is a question for the both of you too, and it's really good. So how and where do you start with writing or selling books? They can never find any guidance on how to start writing books and turning that passion into a career.
That's the great thing about these workshops. No matter whose workshop you go to, you'll find sort of basic ideas about starting writing. And it's like we said before, you have to just write. And that sounds so obvious. And then share your work around and become more interested in sending your work off to journals or reading your work at venues or submitting to film, grants and things like that. Just getting into that world. And you can only do that by starting writing and sharing your work and building upon, because writing is a craft as much as it's not just genius and perspiration. It really is something that you work on and work on and work on, and you might go from screenplays to poems to novels, and you can do everything. You can focus on one thing, but you need to be around it all the time and be inspired. And Nova's books are incredible, so read other people. I can't stress that enough. You must read other people.
I agree. I think that's such a huge thing, isn't it? It's just reading as much accessing as much as you can and reading as widely as you can, and just rewriting and rewriting. Yes. And that for me was the biggest thing, I think. And I don't know if you found this, Alicia, but when I started off, I just had this idea that I could just write one draft and it would be brilliant, and I'd send it out into the world, and strangely enough, it would come back with a rejection letter. And it took me a lot of years to realize that actually honing your work is a long and boring process, which I still do not like doing, actually, but it is so essential because it will never get taken, it will never get published unless it's, polished, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to look at it. I think it's important to kind of hone those passions, and I think it's almost better to keep them, keep those passions, even when trying to turn it into a career. You need to go back to where you started and still like it, because otherwise you'll just get really sick of it. So I think it's time to wrap up, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you to everyone else for joining us. Next week, we will have another panel with the State Library on the 23rd at the same time as today, so 5 o'clock. They will be talking about slam poetry and nonfiction/journalism, and that is with Maxine Beneba-Clark and Li Jing McIntosh, and it's moderated by Yanan Chai. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Imogen.
Thanks, Imogen. Thanks, Nova.
Bye.